Beatbooks presents to you a book summary of David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. I do not think that there is a person who does not know David Goggins, who has become very famous in recent times, especially in social media sites. Goggins is famous for not knowing the impossible and being a positive person to the extreme. A great person with great passion and always trying to go beyond his limits. His eyes are full of passion, but was he born like this? How was his life and what are the difficulties he went through? And what changed it to become what it is today? All of this we'll talk about in this video. His father was aggressive and abusive, and he lived in poverty during his childhood, which resulted in a series of traumas. From here we can predict a life of poverty filled with, well, poverty and depression. But the opposite is what happened. Goggins overcame all odds by practicing self-control, having a strong mind and working hard. He overcame being an overweight, hopeless young man by resolving to lose weight and raise his academic standing. Goggins did not have an idyllic childhood, filled with playing and friends and loving attention from his family. Conversely, he was forced to work like a slave by his aggressive and abusive father, who also made the rest of the family work in the skating rink he owned. Goggins was obviously not an exception. When he was 6 years old, he began working in the skate shoe maintenance department. After finishing his shift, he would go to bed at midnight at the rink's office. Due to the loud music and the noise of the skaters, he had trouble falling asleep. He frequently slept off during class at school as a result. Goggins was subjected to violence and beating by his father frequently and continuously. He witnessed his mother being subjected to physical and mental abuse, and if he acted to protect her, he would too be beaten and mistreated. His mother escaped with him to Indiana when he was 8 years old, so that he might begin a new life together. However, after a short while, they discovered that they had moved to one of the most racist areas in America. Being the only black child in Indiana, he was rapidly the object of racism and ridicule. He was frequently threatened by weapons and frequently subjected to crude and brutal insults. He didn't seem to be making any progress in his life, and in addition to all that of his problems, he was also experiencing anxious stuttering, hair loss, and change in the hue of his skin. Goggins was unsure of the reason of these symptoms. He was exposed to toxic anxiety, and this disease affects those who were exposed to violence and abuse in their childhood. Due to his status, Goggins attended a middle school with special section for students with special needs and struggled to read during his teenage years, which among other effects of this change can result in the possibility of memory loss and difficulty learning and remembering new information. The Mirror of Accountability. Chapter 2. After meeting one of those troops in high school, Goggins started to have an ambition of his own to join the US Air Force. Although it was nothing more than a dream, at that time he believed that attaining this was unlikely, because entering the Air Force needs certain skills, which he believed he lacked due to his level of schooling. Goggins had to relearn all he had learned over the previous 10 years in order to pass the admission exam for the armed forces. One day, he looked at the mirror at home for a long time and hated himself and the state he had reached. He wanted to change, so he made a decision to start with his appearance. He shaved his head, changed his clothes, and then got a paper on which he put the requirements for passing the military test. Began his small things that can be easily to achieve. Clean your room every day, and then included a difficult task, such make sure to run several miles a day. That's what he called accountability mirror. This accountability mirror turned the lives of Goggins, and was the beginning of everyday ritual practice, standing in front of the mirror in order to remind himself about his plans and goals. He started studying and training daily. He did not let any time pass without investing it to achieve his goals. Although Goggins had many limiting factors and traumas, he came to believe that his future could be changed. And in the end, he was able to pass the Air Force exam and was on his way to join it. But to complete his training in order to enter the armed forces, he had to pass the swimming exam. Goggins had a big fear of water that could reach the point of a phobia. A routine medical examination revealed that Goggins suffered from sickle cell anemia, and this was a good excuse for him to leave the armed forces. Goggins failed to achieve his dream due to his fear of water and ended his career in the Navy. Chapter 3. Changing his entire life. After leaving the military, Goggins currently works as a cockroach exterminator and weighs around 300 pounds. On one of the most difficult days of work, the struggle against cockroaches began. He wonders how he got to be this way that day. Goggins saw documentary about the US Navy military groups the same day. The Navy SEALs are one of the most powerful units in the world, with the most difficult exercises, physically being and mentally. And to join it, you have to be among the best. Goggins was amazed at the toughness and the persistence of the Navy SEALs. And before the documentary was even finished, he decided to join these units and started making calls. After a short time, he realized he was too fat to join them, and the training program and the admission closes only in 90 days. Goggins had to lose 107 pounds in less than 90 days if he wanted a chance to become a member of the Navy SEALs. Goggins implemented a strict fitness regime that was wake up every day at 4 o'clock in the morning and train for 2 hours on the bike, and then train in the nearest swimming pool for 2 hours, and then go to the gym and train harsh muscles. His training is not over yet. He spends the rest of his day riding a bike before and after dinner. Goggins created a new accountability system to combat his doubts and negative thoughts, and he finally succeeded. He reached his desired weight and entered the Navy SEALs training program, which aims to choose only 30 out of 120 candidates selected for entry into the training program of the Navy SEALs. The third week of the program is the most tough and taxing, and it is referred to as the Hell Week, during which the candidates are exposed to various kinds of dangerous trainings and tests on the beach and the sea, which may even lead to the end of their lives. He failed twice to make it through the Hell Week, and he only had one attempt left, so he decided he had to hack into the minds of the coaches who stood in his way. Goggins encouraged team members to continue chanting and screaming and urging them to remain determined, and they insist on making it clear to the coaches that they will not give up. Goggins made it clear to the coaches that he and his comrades would not be frustrated and their attempts and attacks would not work for them. Chapter 4. The 40%. Because of his mental strength and his non-surrender, Goggins was able to achieve his goal and join the Navy. But there was another problem. He found himself longing for the kind of challenge he faced in Hell Week. How can he find a challenge and push and motivate himself? In 2005, Goggins finally found a solution. This is through running marathons called ultra running. If you had to get up early tomorrow and run 100 miles, would you do so? I say we can't because it's impossible. But Goggins, on the other hand, was well aware that only his thoughts could stop him. He decided to take part in the Badwater 135 race, which is the toughest sprint race in the world. His participation was motivated by a desire to help the families of his fallen Marine friends. And of course he had to qualify in order to enter the race, and after passing the race of the 100 miles in San Diego, he participated in the qualifying race. After the run of the 70 mile, Goggins no longer believes he is okay. Due to the weariness, he lost control of his bladder and bowel movements. He appeared to be blind and was running with a broken bone in his leg. Any normal person would have stopped long before he reached this stage, but Goggins is not an ordinary person to explain how he managed to push himself to complete a race of the 100th mile. Just imagine the feeling after a hard physical exercise that you can't do more. According to Goggins, you must add another 60%, which he refers to as the 40% rule. According to this guideline, a person gives up after putting 40% of his effort and talent. For example, if you believe you can only run 4 miles, your true capacity is closer to 10 miles. So when you believe you have done everything possible, at this point continue and do not stop. Beyond this point, you will grow and progress, and the borders that prevent you from going higher will just collapse. Goggins finished the race in 19 hours and ran an extra mile. This qualified him for the 2006 edition of Badwater race. Goggins prepped and prepared well for this race, training in conditions comparable to the race day. He finished 5th and was able to complete the race in 30 hours thanks to the 40% rule. Goggins was able to push himself to his boundaries and achieve something incredible that was nearly unattainable. Chapter 5. The unfamiliar versus the unfamiliar. After the Badwater 135 race, Goggins has participated in several races at the rate of more than 1 race per month and for several consecutive months. But a surprise awaits him. He was forced to abandon his love to compete in races forever. In one of the races, he felt a massive pain in his heart and he was taken to the hospital. And there was a surprise. They discovered that Goggins' heart had a hole that was there all the time. It is a difficult condition that causes a lack of oxygen in the body and may lead to sudden death. In the last 10 years, the threats have increased. Goggins was a member of the Navy SEALs, which meant that his body was subjected to the impossible throughout the training, and diving was an important part of it. Miraculously, Goggins averted death because his work as a diver increased the likelihood of his heart stopping. Simply life will surprise us with many difficulties, but our response to all that is what matters, and it is what makes the difference. With this mindset, Goggins became one of the only 36 African Americans in the Navy SEAL team, as well as the only African American in the elite ultra runner races. But with his long racing career over, he had to look for new challenges. And as soon as the Navy heard about Goggins' accomplishments, they invited him to become one of their top trainers. His work was focused on making Navy SEALs a more attractive environment for young black men. And of course, Goggins proudly accepted the task. He began to focus on himself and recruitment and public speaking. But there was always that problem. He always needs more and more. How can he push himself to be at the top of his level again? Of course, he can no longer compete in the marathon run with his purest heart. Goggins knew that the world record for pull-ups is 2,021 times in 24 hours. So he sought to break it. After 2 failed attempts, he was able to break the world record on January 20, 2013. Chapter 6. The Power of Our Minds. Goggins defied all obstacles and was able to be unique. Mathematically, he was doomed to a life of gloom and failure. Many of those who lived a childhood and a teenagehood similar to what Goggins went through turned to be addicts, criminals, or mental patients. So how did Goggins do it? Goggins tells us that his daily decisions is what made him and allowed him to overcome the obstacles, and made him live a successful life even though he did not have that at the beginning of his life. And a feature helps him to do so. How can you unlock your true potential? There is no secret to success. You simply have to work hard and diligently, and to have a total commitment to achieving your goals. You also need to continue to do so. At one point, Goggins could barely read. He was working on fighting cockroaches and he weighed 300 pounds. After losing weight, he studied hard to enter the Navy training program. He did it simply by getting up in the morning and doing what he needed to do. Almost all of us are good at finding excuses, but everyday problems are part of life, and it's not an excuse for not doing something. As they say, the person who goes to the gym against compulsion will always be better than the person who goes when he wants to. If you want to accomplish something, you have to make the most of the early morning. A typical day for Goggins starts at 4 in the morning. Then he jogs for 6 to 10 miles. Then he goes home, takes a shower and eats. He sets himself up for work and then bikes 25 miles to work. He reaches his office at 7:30. During the lunch break, he does a full class in gym or running 6 miles on the beach. Then after work, he bikes 25 miles home. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Goggins has cycled at least 50 miles and run at least 10 miles. And he finished 9 to 5 daily shift. We all have 24 hours in a day, and it is up to us to use them wisely. If Goggins gave up to the darkness, his past, his harsh life, and his illness, he would now be in another place. But his advantage is his will, his continuity, and his search for new challenges. Listen to me carefully, very carefully. That every successful person in this life is just a loser who failed 99 times, but succeeded the 100th time. It all happened because he refused to give up. Work and keep working, and you will find peace and happiness in the end. This is a summary of the book You Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Thank you all from Beatbooks.